Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the sixth and final installment of the Mustang Hockey Hot Stove Series. I hope wherever you are across the country, you're enjoying the great summer-like weather we've been having the last few days. Takes your mind a little bit away from hockey, but we're still looking forward to a great show tonight. Before I start with introductions, as I usually do, I just had a very personal and special message to share. A very good friend, colleague, and a great man, Bob McLeod. Bob has worked with the Mustang hockey program for 13, 14 years, and I've known him for a long time. Bob is on the hot stove tonight on his iPad, sitting in a recliner down in Ottawa, Ontario. And Bobby, I just wanted to say hi from all of us. I know you're in a battle down there, and we just all wanted to know we're with you, and keep battling hard. I'll see you really soon. So hi, Bob. Keep fighting. That being said, folks, we're joined tonight by our outstanding host, Ryan Robinson, who has just done a great job through the 3 months and 6 editions of the Hot Stove. So thanks again, Ryan, for being with us. And it's my real pleasure tonight to introduce one of the great men in not only in the broadcasting industry, but in the sport, Mr. Sam Cosentino of Rogers Sportsnet. I've known Sam for quite a while. He's got a tremendous U Sport connection. He's been the broadcaster at a number of University Cup championships over the years, and I've got to know him there. I've also seen him at many junior hockey rinks across the country. Sam is not only a broadcaster, but he's an author and columnist at sportsnet.ca. Sam has, I guess the best way to put it is he's an expert in all things junior hockey. Sam does all the NHL draft rankings for Sportsnet. He is a CHL prospect guru. He is one of the hosts of the CHL Friday Night Game of the Week on Sportsnet when we're in a normal year. He commentates and knows a lot about all the World Junior Championships. And a couple of notes, Sam just released on sportsnet.ca his 2021 NHL Draft rankings for the first round. I was actually driving today and turned on Hockey Central at noon out of the Fan 590 in Toronto, and Sam was a guest on there today. So we're very pleased to welcome Sam to the show tonight. A reminder that after the interview portion, you're welcome to type in questions in the chat box below, and Sam will do his best to answer those questions. So without further ado, welcome Sam, and welcome Ryan to the show.
Thanks so much, Clark, for the awesome introduction. I'm glad you're pumping me up.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've already got an agent. I think you got one ready right here in the middle.
Nice.
Hey, we got it. We got to have wheels up on this last podcast. We got to get going. We got to get going hard. So, thanks again, Ryan and Sam, for joining us. I look forward to hearing all the information and all the stories.
Amazing. Thanks, Coach.
We'll let you go, and as I always make the joke, he's got a sheriff and take care of the guys in the chat section to make sure they're doing things right. So, I was going to say for a second there, I thought he was going to go, he was going to go full Ken Reed with the pucks in deep comment there, but go. Well, didn't know if he was going to come in with it, but first and foremost, as Clark mentioned, Sam, appreciate you taking the time. We were joking beforehand that. It's for us. It's kids are in bed, so now we get the time to ourselves. What do we do when the kids go to bed? We talk a little more hockey, right? So nice to. It's one of the weird things I've said throughout this series. It's a lot of people that Clark knows, and then I just get to talk to them, usually for the first time. So like most people, I'm sure that walk up to you, they feel like they know you because they've seen you doing your thing go across the Sportsnet network. So again, for me, feels like somebody I know a little bit already. So we'll try and have a little fun here over the next kind of 40 minutes or so. But first, Clark mentioned, obviously, for most people, they would when they're thinking about your involvement and your work at Sportsnet sort of thing. Obviously, a lot of time spent in across the CHL, but you've got that U Sport connection, that love of the game of hockey in general. Is there a couple memories that stick out from those university, the U Sport championships from across the couple years, that the ones that you've done, sort of thing, and kind of where does the level in the game of university hockey kind of sit in your heart, kind of thing?
I've loved it, and it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago where we put some more attention into the CHL property at Sportsnet, and that didn't allow us the break to be able to come and do the U Sports, and I've missed it tremendously. I love the tournament. I mean, yeah, it was a little bit silly the way it was set up before, sure. The one and dones, I'm not so sure if I'm a big fan of that, but it does create some of the excitement. But what an unbelievable event. And the coolest part of doing, I think it was 6, maybe 8 of the championships, was that I'd seen so many of the kids grow up literally from the ages of 16 right across our country. And, this guy lives out west. Next thing you know, he's playing at Western, or this guy's here and he's out east playing in Freddie, or, all the U of A guys kind of sticking around close to there. The same thing with the USass guys would end up being, staying close to home. So it was really cool for me, because I think over the course of my time doing those, the U Cups, mostly between 70 and 80% of the players played in the CHL. So I already had a great knowledge base, and it really made you comfortable going in. But I'll never forget my first one. We were in Moncton. And so, I'd done some games in the Moncton Coliseum before, and we went in there, and it was a practice day. And Pete Lubardius and I were working together at that time. He was my partner calling the CHL games, and McGill was practicing. The head coach was Marty Raymond. And literally, Pete and I were the only 2 guys in the rink. And so we came in and, we had our notebooks and our jackets and so on. And we sat down, and, I kept noticing Marty, who I'd never met before, and Peter had never met, just kept looking up into the stands. And he had this pissed off look, like, what are you doing here? So sure enough, he had stopped the practice and got a security guard, and you could see them talking, and we're like, what the hell is going on here? Well, 5 minutes later, that security guard's coming up through the Moncton Coliseum, comes over to Pete and I and says, "You're not allowed to be here. The coach doesn't want you here." And I said, no, you tell the coach we're here to get our work done. And so he had thought, I think, that we were a member of another team. And even still, if we were media, he didn't want us giving away any of his secrets. So, during the course of our season doing CHL games, it doesn't give you a lot of time to watch the U Sports, but our company was good enough to let us go in at the very earliest time we were allowed to be able to attend all the practices, all the coaches conference, get down there, see some of the players we haven't seen in a while, and really do your prep to be able to deliver a good broadcast. As you know, Ryan, there's a lot of work that goes into it. And as much as you can do on paper and in the internet and so on and so forth, your best prep is being able to talk to the participants and the coaches. So anyways, I remember the practice ends. We go down there, and Marty was fit to be tied. And basically we said to him, "Hey, slow down a sec. This is our job. We're here to do a good job. You don't know us. We don't know you, but we're going to, this is what we're doing. And so we promise not to give any secrets away, but in order to deliver a good broadcast with your team in it, it's essential for us to be here and to talk to you and so on and so forth." So as it turns out, Marty kind of was still a little bit gruff about that interaction. And it turns out he ends up working in a couple different places in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. And every time I see him, especially a few times there when he was in Drummondville, I'd always recount that story. It's like, "Hey, remember the first time we met? You were pissed off that we were there doing our job." And so at that point, with him being such a hardworking guy, I think he appreciated what we were able to do. And after a while, that's kind of how you build that trust. And it's no different than we've done a lot of games in London, and it's the same thing with Mark and Dale Hunter. Until you can kind of really gain their trust and earn their trust, the door's closed. You're not talking to anybody, and so it takes a while. But it's really like any other business. It's about building relationships. So, I just think back to the elation and the joy of teams that have won, and getting to see all the coaches and just introducing yourself to different people and continue to build out the network. So it's been really cool. A lot of the there's still guys that I talk to that have coached, in youth sports. And I see Dave Adolph is gone now. Trevor Steinberger, who I know quite well, he's gone now. Gardner McDougall's the guy, we talk every once in a while. And every now and then coaches will call and, even just talk about recruiting. Hey, what did you see in this guy overage over here? So on and so forth. So I loved it mostly because it was an opportunity to watch someone I'd watched 7 or 8 years ago at 16 years old kind of go through this continuum and still play unbelievably competitive hockey and ultimately for championships. So I really missed it. I still miss it. I wish I had an opportunity to do it again, but you never know when those things might come up.
The things go a little crazy in life, as we've learned in the last little bit. You never know what comes around the corner, sort of thing. So, from that aspect, sort of thing, I know for you, and it's one thing, and I promised I wouldn't go too baseball geek because I know it's a hockey show, but that's where things kind of started for you on the broadcast side of things, initially in a bit of a different route. For those who don't know, sort of thing, you're involved with you're involved with the Blue Jays. Then there's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then all of a sudden it becomes a Montreal Expos involvement and everything like that. Take us through those early days, sort of thing, because I'm sure there's a couple people watching that are they're kind of saying they look, maybe they fire up Wikipedia and they go, wait a second, why does it say equipment manager for the Blue? What's going on here?
I was so lucky. I've been blessed to my whole working life has been in sports. I mean, I go back to 16 years old, 1987, old Exhibition Stadium. I was hired as a bat boy in the visiting side for the Blue Jays. And so as a bat boy and a ball boy, I spent more time as a ball boy there, but we'd work in that stadium, and at Exhibition Stadium, the bullpens were down the lines. So the visiting team was on the first base side. Our bullpen was down the right field line, and my job was to go out and protect the catcher, because the catcher, I'd be standing here facing the field to play. The catcher would be behind me, and the guys would be warming up behind me. And so you got guys throwing 100, bouncing stuff in the turf and the warning track and whatever else. And so I'd have balls passing me, and I'm like, holy shit, I might get hit here. And then same thing the other way. You get a good left-handed hitter, slow curveball, whatever else. He's yanking a ball down that right field line, and your job is to protect the catcher so he doesn't get hit in the bat. So I took a couple of stingers, and I was wearing multiple gloves, and I'm not going to lie, I pooped my pants a few times out there. And but that's where it started for me. And then ended up on a baseball scholarship to a small school in Michigan. I went there because, in part because they gave me money to play baseball, but also educationally, there were some opportunities there to pursue a degree in broadcasting. Graduated from there, came back. That was a strike year in 94. And so in late April 95, baseball ended up coming back. The Blue Jays called. They needed to staff some people for the clubhouse. Went back and worked in the visiting clubhouse for a year, and then went over to the home side in 96. And when I went to work in the home side, I'd work all spring training and all home games. And so that left a lot of time, and I still wanted to pursue this broadcasting dream of mine. In 1999, I got hired at the Score. I was voicing highlights and doing some stuff there, and that kind of progressed. 2003, we had the Canadian Baseball League, and some people would know, Ryan, you would remember, it was very short-lived. I think it was the London team there, and I ended up doing a game there in London, actually. So did maybe 20 games in 2003. 2004, the Score got the rights to broadcast Expos games. That was the last year of their existence in Montreal. Did that. 05, 06, got hired at Sportsnet, started doing lacrosse, CHL, and then that blended into doing baseball. 2010, I got to do the play-by-play, which was the first year that Buck Martinez came in. He still had obligations elsewhere, and so the weekends that he would take off to go work for TBS, I'd be the play-by-play announcer on the weekend. So that was a dream come true for me. And then kind of the junior hockey stuff has been a big part of everything. Growing up and doing them locally in Rogers and Mississauga. Did some stuff in Barrie, did some stuff in downtown Toronto, St. Mike's Majors, Mississauga, Brampton. So it's really come full circle, and I've been blessed to travel this journey, to be honest with you.
And then obviously you mentioned, has it always been, and I know a lot of the times, especially for those who are interested in sports broadcasting, very seldom is it, one track vision of, I only want to do this one sport. I think, I know for me, Jim Van Horn at Fanshawe College, I walked in and I said, Jim, all I want to be is the anchor on Sportsnet for reading highlights every night. That's the only thing I want to do. Don't tell me about picking up cameras. Don't ask me about, tell me what. I don't want to know how to do it. He said you might want to broaden your horizons a little bit there, right? Was it always kind of hockey, baseball, or is it always kind of just been a bit of a broad spectrum and then just kind of roll with the punches kind of thing?
Well, I wanted to do games, and I thought I could do games, and as a play-by-play announcer. So that was always the kind of the end goal and the dream. But locally there were some opportunities to host, to color, to work as a color commentator, and not many opportunities to do the play-by-play. But that's still what I wanted to do. That was my dream. And so as I kind of continued along, it just followed where some of the opportunities arose, and they were mostly in the color chair and in the hosting chair. So that's what I did. And that's essentially how it came to fruition. But it was kind of cool for me because, doing those 25 or 30 games for the Expos was one thing, but the Blue Jays, I'd grown up with them since I was 16. So that was literally living a dream. And after that, I realized I wasn't cut out to be a play-by-play guy. I was not very good at the job. For whatever reason, even having played at a high level in college and being around it so much, once I got into the booth, the game, it didn't slow down for me the way I thought it would. And so it was difficult for me. And, you've worked with some play-by-play guys. They have a little bit different mindset. They tend to have the ability to have this crazy memory, to be able to access those files on the fly, yet still have the calmness to be able to describe what's going on around them. And to marry those two things, I just wasn't good at it. And so it was a hard realization, and I ended up being the third guy on the Blue Jays broadcast for a while, where I'd sit in the stands with the scouts and try and relay some of the things that they were doing, or I'd walk around and talk to different people. And, that position had evolved. It was kind of the beginning in its infancy stages, and now it's evolved into whatever Hazel does, and whatever Ben Wagner's doing, and what Arash does at times. And so it sucked to come to the realization that I wasn't good at the thing that I dreamt to do my whole life. But it's also led to some amazing opportunities in doing hockey. And it's funny, I got taken off those broadcasts in 2010. Right after my first year of doing those 25 games of play-by-play, and I was so mad at the world. It took me a long time to get over it, because I felt that was kind of my destiny, because I'd grown up there. And so when it didn't work out, it took a long time to get over it. Eventually ended up getting married in 2011, and then having kids, and being in a hockey job and having kids is the most amazing thing, because now I work during the winter when they're in school, and I have my summers off with them. It's almost like a teacher's job. So sometimes that crazy path and being pissed off and whatever else, it turned, and it's come full circle. And honestly, I've lived what I realize now was the real dream here for the last 15 years, doing junior hockey, having my summers off, and being able to hang out with my kids.
What's the and kind of that enjoyment of kind of the junior hockey element, and the fact that you become, even as Clark said off the top, kind of the preeminent kind of go-to. I know for junior hockey content, I bug Jeff Merrick constantly, just because periodically I'll say, well, what's going on with this or something. I'm sure you guys have 7,000 random people just texting about nonsense all the time, but in having that kind of involvement, that distinction sort of thing, because I listened to 31 Thoughts, and the amount of times that people talk, obviously to Elliot about things of NHL with its territory, but he always makes mention, like, the first thing out of his mouth is usually, Jeff, I know, when they're talking about anything CHL wise, it's this is kind of where you guys live, eat, and breathe. You see the guys before they get to, before anybody, people knew what Connor McDavid was going to be when he was 15. But all of a sudden it's, I remember Mitch Marner walking into the Bud Gardens and people saying he's 5'3" and 135 pounds, and this is your hot shot first rounder. Lindsey Hofford had, an idea or two what was going on there, but how much is that of the enjoyment of seeing that, that 16-year-old kid that's the Sean Wrights and the McDavids and those kind of things. You know what's going on with Shane, but those guys sort of thing that you kind of be able to say, the age-old element. I saw him when he was 14. I knew he was going to be good when he was 15, sort of thing. Before it, the general fandom becomes that aware, should we say?
Well, that is one hugely amazing element of that job. I mean, I look at now what are 7 exceptional players, and I've had the opportunity to call games for all of them except for Connor Bedard, and because of the pandemic that hasn't happened, or otherwise I'm sure we would be there. So that part is really cool. But honestly, the biggest element and probably the best joy that I get out of doing my job are the relationships. And that's why working in the CHL is literally, when I tell people I have the best gig in sports, I mean it. And this is one element that when you ask me about doing the U sports that I didn't properly portray. And the fact of the matter is, the ability to be able to walk into any one of the 60 teams in the CHL or most U sports teams and be able to sit down and have a conversation with the coaching staff, with some of the players, that's the kind of access you don't get. And so, it's taken a long time, but I've built up such a good network of people, literally from coast to coast, that you can lean on either with a phone call, or if you happen to be out on the road traveling, that you can stop into their offices. And it's funny. I text back and forth with Ryan McGill sometimes. He's a coach in Vegas, or Steve Spott or Pete DeBoer, or all these guys that I've had the great luxury of being able to see when they were coaching in junior, and just chatting along with them like we were long lost buds while they do their thing in the NHL. But it's that relationship building, the networking, it's the friendships that come out of it. I've kind of taken some of that and tried to apply it to what I do in terms of how I build my scouting network. That's such an important piece for me. I know you guys had Steve Bowman on one of the hot stoves. We've become pretty good friends over the years here, watching games, talking about players and what's going on in hockey. But honestly, that's probably the greatest enjoyment I get, is the ability to be able to go in and to have open, frank, honest conversations, to know that I'm a trusted person, even though that I'm in the media, to be able to get the true story of what's going on, and to be able to go into literally any one of 60 markets and do that. And that's where I find the true joy. And sometimes, you end up in a coach's office, and the conversation, it's not even about hockey. It's about what's going on in the world. It's about baseball a lot of times, believe it, because a lot of those coaches love baseball, and they know that I have a history in the game. So that's honestly, that's the most important and the most enjoyable part of the gig, in my opinion.
Isn't that usually the most part way with anybody, especially it doesn't matter the level of sports sort of thing? Once you find out their second love, that becomes the conversation.
Yeah.
I know I was talking to Mike Stubbs in town recently about his career kind of thing, and he said to me, he goes, I remember him saying to me once, if you ever want to get McDavid really excited, talk to him about Buffalo Bills football. He goes, don't talk hockey with them, because it's like talking to a wall. It's just the great ones always are that certain way of doing interviews. They know the line, they say it the way it's supposed to go. He goes, so if you're ever around them and you need to rise out of them, Buffalo Bills football, and all of a sudden you'll just start talking your ear off. And I was like, I think I've interviewed McDavid 4 or 5 times, and I don't think I've ever thought that he would talk my ear off about anything. But interesting scenarios there. But how much fun is putting the draft list together is kind of like the prospect list, and kind of for the upcoming draft, because that's kind of where it goes from all this time of it's very much. Is it very much? Do you feel like the same thing when you talk to like a Steve Bowman or something like that, when they're strategizing about players they want to pick for their team? It's almost the same thing for you, isn't it? You got to basically feel like an NHL scout, because you're kind of just trying to gather as much information as possible, so that when it comes draft time, you kind of everything you can about each one. But it's got to be a little bit of fun to sit there and go, I think he's going 13. He's got to be, because I know this guy and that guy and this guy and that guy. There's like a puzzle piece effect going on, isn't there?
It's funny you say that, because literally that's how it works. And so, I never pretend to be a scout. I mean, I don't. That's not what I am. But I like to think that after many years in the game, that I have the ability to do some of that. Probably couldn't do it in a professional sense in terms of that being my only job. But I do think that it's something that maybe if I had to make a career change that I think I could work myself into. But the part of it for me is it's twofold. I always want to see as many players as I can with my own eyes. I think that's hugely important. The second part is I always want to make the effort to see as many players as possible. So, for example, if I get on the horn and I want to call Steve and ask him about a player, I don't feel right in doing that unless I've made every effort to go and see that player myself, and if not, do it by means of video. And so at that point, it's like I don't want to steal your information. I want to be able to have a good two-way conversation. I want to have that give and take. I want to give you my thoughts. I want to corroborate what I saw with my own eyes because I don't have the trained eye like you do. And they're smart guys. There's a lot of trust that has to go on there, and B, they're not giving any secrets away. Like I've never had a team tell me, "Hey, we're going to go and take this guy in this spot." That just doesn't happen. And so, everyone is very protective of what they do, but I always like to look at it as information sharing because a lot of times with my connections in the CHL, I can get some of that background information that maybe not everyone has access to. And so by sharing some of that background information, which has become a lot more important in these days of drafting players, I'm able to maybe extract some of the player information that I wasn't able to process or didn't see enough of. And so that is a real, kind of important part of the job. But putting that list together is a lot of fun. There's a lot of hard work that goes into it. It's funny because the list went out yesterday, and I got a call from one agent, one former coach, another agent, and a GM. Hey, where's my guy? Where's my guy? La la la. And I always answer those calls and I answer those texts because I love how those people are advocating for their players, and I think it's great. And so what that also does sometimes is it pushes that person to say, hey, maybe this guy needs to know more about player X or player Y. Maybe I'm going to give him some more information or some access to some more video or whatever the case might be. So it's a labor of love, no doubt. I absolutely love doing it. I love the conversations I get into with people about different players. So it's neat. I really enjoy it.
Obviously, you've been involved with a bunch of the draft coverage and that kind of thing. I know that it's become the habit, especially. I don't know if it's just like a last year or the last couple of years thing. Everybody likes to go back and redraft previous drafts. This guy should have went here and that guy should have went there. I don't know if this is just a social media thing in the COVID times because people have nothing better to do with their time. But is it a scenario where you go back later on and it's kind of like, wow, how did that guy not go higher? Or is it one of those scenarios looking back, knowing a few things that you knew when they were in junior, and you kind of go, I knew that guy should have gone a little higher.
It's funny. It's funny, Ryan, because a lot of times, usually that's more part of the conversation. I'm like, well, I knew that about that guy. It's never, oh yeah, I completely messed that one up. The one thing that I always talk about, I'm not really good with goalies. Like I can't figure goalies out to save my life. I remember watching Braden Holtby when he played in Saskatoon, and I'm like, this guy's brutal. Like there's no chance. Oh my gosh, he got drafted. What? Oh, he'll never make it. Next thing you know, he's hoisting the Stanley Cup, right? So the goaltending situation, I'm not particularly good with. But yeah, like you go back sometimes, and more. The reason more so for going back is to see where you might have made mistakes. Oh, I remember this note about this guy. Oh, I remember this guy saying that. Oh my gosh. Why was I so silly that I didn't know that this was happening? So, it's pretty interesting because I remember in the Kirby Doc draft, he was a guy that I had a little lower. I'd watched him quite a bit in Saskatoon that year, and there were some things that were going on behind the scenes that I thought, you know what, he might be this and he might be that, but there's just too much noise here, and I think he's going to end up going maybe lower than he should. Well, I got a call probably, I don't know, it was maybe 2 hours before the draft started, and someone said to me, Doc's going third. He is going third. Like, this is a done deal. And I'm like, no way. Like, I can't trust this information. There's just no way that that's going to happen. But anyways, I went to air with it in our preamble of the draft show, and it turns out the information was good. I wish I'd had known it a couple of weeks earlier, but I went back through my notes and I saw that, oh my gosh, this information was actually given to me in these notes by a different person a lot earlier than I expected. So that's sometimes what you do when you go back and you look at the redraft. You're saying to yourself, hey, where did I mess up my notes? Did this guy say this? Could I trust this guy and what he was saying? Maybe this guy was being a little bit too honest. So that's where you go back and you try and fix some of the mistakes in your prep.
And that's the other thing too. It's my favorite is like from, again, by no means I did host a post game show after the Knights game. I never said I was any sort of like advanced knowledge sort of thing. If anything, I probably pissed the Hunters off a lot of it with all the stuff that I had to do. The advantage was I had 80-something-year-old Pete with me, and they loved the hell out of me. But, as long as you had Pete James beside you, you could you could do no wrong. So it worked out that way. But, when it comes to that, the word source from a regular person just watching the show perspective, sometimes they don't really, they think, you've got one person calling you and saying, Sam, this is what's going to happen. It's very much a piece of this, piece of this, piece of this, and then trying to kind of factor it all together. And as you say, to a trust factor of who's actually giving me good information and who's maybe trying to artificially pump the tires of somebody that they shouldn't.
Yeah. And you know what? And that's why I don't generally deal with a lot of agents. There are a couple of them that I really trust. But I remember a scenario, I don't know, it was a draft maybe 4 years ago, and I had an agent on me all year long about two of his players. Guaranteed first rounders, look at the numbers. This goes back and it's historical with other draft eligibles and this position and so on and so forth. And so I took the bait. And I put them in my mock draft, both in the first round, and both of them ended up going in the second round. So now that's somebody that when they call, I know that there's a specific agenda. I take their information with a grain of salt, and then I try and extract a little bit of additional things that might help me down the road in terms of, all right, I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm going to put this guy in my first round and advocate for him and whatever else. But you got to give me more. I need more information. I need a good story. I need something nobody else has, so that when we go to air, if this guy does get taken in the first round, then I have that information. So it really more depends on, the CHL. We look at, I think there's 43% players that graduated from the CHL that are in the NHL right now. I try and do my greatest due diligence on the players that I've seen with my own eyes that played in the CHL, where I have the most connections, and I tend to lean on my network and other people and piece together some of the European players, some of the U.S. players that I don't get to see on a regular basis, and that's how, you're exactly right, how you kind of build the puzzle and put it all together.
Now, obviously, this last year and change has been, insanity in general for everything across the world for multiple reasons, sort of thing. But I know in talking to a couple guys so far about, the how different the schedule is, and you mentioned obviously the factor of enjoying the fact that winter is busy and summer is not as much. But how different has this kind of time around been for you, kind of thing? Because obviously you're not going, when you guys are doing the CHL showcase, it's once a week, and if not more, and you're Quebec, you're out west, you're in Ontario. I know there's kind of a it's to the point it's scheduled, but then all of a sudden some interesting game comes up, or your latter half of the season, something's of interest, and all of a sudden, no, we're not going to go here, we're going to go there. How crazy has this kind of change been for your usual sort of thing? Or is it just a whole lot of trying to watch as many European hockey feeds as there can be, sort of thing?
Yeah, that's it. So I use Instat, and I'm sure, Clark and some of the other coaches out there would be very familiar with that platform, but they do a really good job with their video, and they literally have video of everybody. It's not always the best video, but it's a great resource to be able to watch players. And so, I take advantage of that. But for me, there's a lot of, I miss traveling with my colleagues. Rob Faulds and RJ Broadhead. Greg Hood is another guy that we travel with, and our little 4-pack really designs our travel based on our ability to see either as many games and practices as we can see in order to prepare for the game that we're doing. But as part of that, it's getting out for dinner, it's getting out for a couple of drinks, it's socializing. I missed that part way more than I ever expected. I miss the buzz of live TV. Like, you know, when you're on in a post-game show with the London Knights, there's no buzz like the buzz of being in live TV. And for the alumni out there, the coaches, the players, there's no buzz like being in a game. There's no buzz like coaching a game. You just don't have that. So for guys who weren't talented enough like me to be able to play sports at that high level,
that's why I talk about it too.
That's right. That's right. That's what we do. And so that's where your buzz is. And I miss that. And I just miss that continuum of relationship building. I miss getting to see the great country. You know, the one benefit is, if I leave the house, my son or daughter is like, Dad, like, when are you coming back? And I'm like, 2 hours. Like, 2 hours. Okay, great. We love you. We'll see you then. And that part's been really cool to be able to spend a whole year. Like, I honestly can't think of since my days at 16 years old, and when I went away to play baseball at Spring Arbor in Michigan, and all the jobs I've had, I've never been at home for this amount of time, never. So we're talking about, what is it, a year, and I think I came home March 8th. We did a game March 8th or 9th in Windsor was our last game. I went to Florida to see my family for a couple of days. We came back right at the start of the quarantine period. But basically our last game was March 9th, and now we're into April. So it's, 13 months. That I've never been that still in my entire life. So that I miss the travel. I like it. I like getting across the country. I like going to new restaurants. I love being in the rink. I love talking to the scouts, socializing with the coaches, the interactions with the players. I really miss my colleagues and some of the great interactions and travel that we've had, and some of the crazy things that we've been able to do along the way. I miss it. I miss it immensely. Just I guess I'm really lucky enough to be in a job that I absolutely love.
For me, I never thought I'd miss the smell of a hockey rink as much as I do, but I'm still waiting for that day I can walk in and go, this place stinks and I love it. Yeah. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about the craziness that is, obviously, that we've got multiple junior hockey leagues. Obviously, the European situation has been going fairly. They've kind of picked up. Obviously, we've seen some Canadian guys go over and play Europe. I'm thinking locally, a Logan Mailloux, picks up, goes over, plays in Europe for a while just because didn't know what the situation was going to be junior wise here. How much is, then there was the whole factor of, is there going to be a draft? Isn't there going to be a draft? Is it going to be later? Is it going to be earlier? For you, for a while there, was it just a matter of sitting there going, all right, let's figure it out so I can put a plan together for what we're going to do here, sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty, being our kind of draft guy, I was pretty confident that it was going to come up at some point. What did start to worry me a little bit is if they were going to do two of them in the same week. And the prep for one is literally it's a year long. In a typical year, you start in August at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament, and then you work through the start of your regular seasons in the CHL, and then the Canada-Russia series gives me a pretty good indication of some of the Russian players. Then you go into the World Juniors. I typically cover that, so you're getting to see all the players from around the world playing as underagers in that event. Then you get back, you continue in the CHL, we get into the playoffs, and then hopefully there's another, the April under 18. So it literally, it goes kind of the whole year. So not having any of those things to do has been really challenging for the in-person viewings. But in terms of the prep, you get people sending you stuff once in a while that's analytic based, and we Instat, like I told you about, good relationship with those guys that have given me access to their platform to be able to watch video. And it's a lot of phone calls, but after a while, people are sick of the meetings and the phone calls. They want to go out and have a coffee, and you can't even really do that anymore. So the golf course is an area that I try to utilize to continue to build those relationships that surely will come up again here before the draft. But yeah, man, I miss that part of it. I miss just being able to be in the rink. But the challenge of not knowing when the draft was going to be only really started to bother me when I thought that there might be two of them in a row. But now that we're July 23rd, July 24th, pretty comfortable with the prep and how it's gone to this point.
Obviously still no OHL scenario. We're still waiting to see if it'll happen. There was, I think a week and a half ago was supposed to be next week. We should know something. We weren't expecting an Ontario-wide lockdown for a month sort of thing. How much could a potential of a non-OHL season affect some of these kids who are looking at this being their draft year and kind of going from we've seen those kind of over the draft rankings. This guy goes from here to here to here to here to here. Now is it the reverse effect? He's not happening and some others are, so they just kind of sit, and then all of a sudden the stack goes a little higher for the ones that are seeing a little more and playing and getting that experience and that rep time.
I think there's three different elements that go along with that, with answering that question. And the first is your higher end guys that are projected to go in the first round, your Brandt Clarks, your Francesco Pinellis, your Mason McTavishes. You're looking at guys in the Ontario Hockey League that are projected first rounders, and they'll probably still all end up going in the first round. Now, they might go a little bit lower than maybe they would have had they been able to play a whole season. So you have your higher end guys. So not too much of an effect there. Then what you have are your guys that fall in after that, your second to seventh rounders. Those, in my opinion, are the guys that are really going to get hurt by this, because a lot of times so much preparation goes into peaking for your draft year in order to make that impression. And so as much as you've tried to train and develop, and your family spent all kinds of money, specialize this, skating, skills, pep, whatever else, those opportunities never presented themselves for them to play a regular schedule of games in their draft years, so that you hope you had a good 16-year-old year, that people remember you from that time. And then for those guys from the second through the seventh round, those, in my opinion, are the guys who are going to get hurt. Now, I guess the flip side of that and the positive side of that is we're looking at late 02s and 2003 borns being eligible for the 2021 draft. So if you go back and you think about some of the reentry players, now you're looking at your 01s and 02s. I think there's great potential there for some of those guys who have put a pretty good book together that just didn't quite make the cut to maybe sneak into those 5 to 7 rounds, because you have a little bit, another year of physical maturity, another year of mental maturity, a year worth of adversity that they've had to go through, or maybe their hockey dreams were shattered. And so now you're looking at that motivation of a player who lost something they love that might be given that opportunity in the pro ranks to do something. So I look at those three different elements. The high end not affected so much, that middle class probably going to be impacted the most, and the re-entries maybe getting a second life or a second opportunity.
We all know that talking to junior hockey players, and you say to them, hey, "Did you notice that you're a B-ranked prospect by NHL Central Scouting or something like that?" "Oh, I don't look at those. I don't know. I don't bother. I don't know." You put your kind of your list together. Have you been in a rink a couple of times where all of a sudden a guy who may appear on one of your ranking lists shows up on a ranking list, and you might happen to be in a rink a couple of days later, and he kind of looks at you and just kind of gives you the nod and maybe a little thanks for the help sort of thing.
So great story about that, Ryan, is in the draft in Buffalo a couple of years ago, the Jack Hughes draft. So I had known the Hughes family. I'd watch Quinn and Jack play their minor hockey. Jack was playing in Luke Hughes was playing he was playing at Detroit Little Caesars. Jack Hughes played with the Marlies a little bit. Quinn Hughes before that did the same thing. So it was Jack's draft year. And he played in the U.S. Under-18 program. They had Trevor Zegras there, who's just going to be an absolute star. Cole Caulfield was there, and Alex Turcotte. Those four guys were there. And so I had an opportunity in the Buffalo draft to go and sit down with those guys and just eat wings and shoot the breeze. We were trying to do a feature where everyone felt comfortable and we could try and extract some neat things from this interaction between those players. So I sat down with those four guys, Jack Hughes being one of them. And the month before, and it was the only time it happened all year, I put him second on my list. And I put Capo Caco ahead of him. And it was in the March list, because I remember going to the OHL Cup and seeing Jim Hughes and Ellen Hughes there. And, they were looking at me sideways like, what the hell are you thinking of doing this? And, oh, yeah, people are saying it's clickbait and all this other sort of stuff. But at that time, I felt Jack had kind of taken a bit of a step back, and Capo had been playing really well in a men's league and performing extremely well. So anyways, we go and sit down and we're having this conversation as part of the feature. And, I asked the guys that question, do you look at the rankings? And so, go around the table and we get to Jack, and Jack says, "No, I don't look at the rankings, but I saw you had me second last month." And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome, man. Like he was, really sly and paying attention to it and whatever else. And that was his way of kind of getting the shot back at me. So that's one story about when you're talking about, hey, having to go and face the noise when you place someone where they don't think they should be placed. And everyone after number one thinks that they are placed in the wrong place, so that was kind of a neat story about that with in the Jack Hughes draft.
Yeah, when you've got the one kind of upcoming, you mentioned the draft ranking just put out a kind of yesterday sort of thing. How much is it a situation right now where there's always the talk of the tier aspect, and there's this tier, then there's kind of the drop off afterwards sort of thing. Is there a situation in this draft where it's kind of obviously there was so much Alexi talk, and is it Alexi? Is it we think and we know he's going first, and okay, what's going to happen after that? What's the feeling on this year, sort of thing? Is it that same scenario where there's kind of a fairly noticeable tier situation, like after a couple guys, or what's the feeling this time around?
Well, the way I look at it is from 8 to 10, I'd feel comfortable picking in there, and I think there's going to be a lot of guys moving quite freely in that top 10. And after that, I think it's a crapshoot. I really do. I think there's an opportunity here maybe to, Jesper Wallstedt's the 6'3", 6'4" Swedish goalie who's a projected first rounder. I'm not a big first round goalie type of guy. Sebastian Cossa is another guy who's playing out in Edmonton, 6'6", left catch guy, really athletic, really confident kid. So there might be an opportunity to take more goalies than what we've seen in the first round. But I truly believe if I'm picking inside of 10, I'm really happy with whoever I'm going to get there. And after that, I think it's a bit of a crapshoot. I really do. Typically, like you say, you find those tiers where there's drop-offs. But I find it after 10, anything goes.
We'll invite questions on the feed there. I usually try and give everybody the warning so that they can start filtering questions in while I ramble on for my last one or two, just so we can get a few in there, sort of thing. But the year that is obviously on the NHL side, you're obviously paying attention closely to the junior hockey side of things. But when you spend that much time watching the junior hockey guys, you inevitably turn around and watch them in their level of success, sort of thing, on the NHL level. How much is there? I know talking to some guys in the past, they kind of say, once they get to a certain level, talking to scouts, for example, we always represent them, but once they kind of get to this point and they go on to, NHL careers, then we're looking for the next crop, sort of thing. Is it for you? Are you a junior hockey and that kind of focus, not focus, but area of interest, sort of thing, or are you enjoying the craziness that is the North Division in the NHL this year?
Yeah, you know what? It's actually been a nice blend, and the really cool part of it is my son. He's 7 now. He doesn't play hockey, but he's really taken an interest to watching it this year and reading about it, magazines, hockey news stuff, and so it's pretty awesome because typically he goes to bed about 8:30 or whatever else. So games that are on at 7:30, 8 o'clock, we can sit down and hunker down on some of them. And you know what I say, like, I blame it, Ryan, literally on NHL 21. So you go back a few months ago, and the CHL put together an E-Memorial Cup, and They asked me to participate as one of they had 60 teams represented across the CHL, and they needed 4 other people to fill in, and they thought, what the hell, this guy's around the CHL a lot, let him play. So as a 50-year-old dude, the last time I played, the thing had 2 buttons. One was shoot, one was pass, and go get them. Now I look at the controller, I'm like, holy shit, there's a button here, this one, press this thumb, there's this one in the middle, there's a 4-way directional here. I'm like, oh my God,
There's nothing wrong with Blades of Steel. Let's just put that out. I love the EA Sports NHL games as much as anything, but there's nothing wrong with back and forth, up and down, shoot and pass. And then it was just punch each other as many times as you can.
That's it. Like, bring me back to those days with just a couple of buttons, right? So anyhow, they sent me the game for free, and I ended up buying our son and daughter the console, just the PlayStation console to be able to play. And interestingly enough, by playing those games, I'm amazed at how many players he knows. So you pick Vegas, he can name 6, 7 guys in Vegas. You pick Vancouver, Winnipeg, McDavid, of course, this and that, Montreal. It's awesome. And it's really exposed them to that. And my wife and I go back and forth about how much they should be on the video games and whatever else. I'm saying, there's no shooting, there's no violence. this guy's learning about the NBA players. He's learning about the NHL players. What better thing can you have to take up his time? And so now in some of his spare time, he's reading the magazines. He wants to know basketball stories, hockey stories. And really his love for it derived out of the video game to the point now where we can watch games live. And anytime you have an affinity for someone who's playing in a game, you want to watch it. And so he's like, Dad, let's see what Stützle's doing, with Ottawa or whatever, and he's like, oh yeah, this guy Marshy, whatever else. Now he's trying to go with the nicknames and everything. So that part's been awesome. So, to answer your question, of course, I'm watching a lot of video and trying to watch what I can online in the queue and in the dub. But we're, pretty awesome to be able to have that experience watching games with my kid the way I used to with my dad when I was growing up.
I got the enjoyment of explaining the baseball graphics system to my daughter actually about an hour and a half ago. She was, what's with the 3 with the arrow pointing up, and why is that guy's name with a P next to it? And my wife was at work, so luckily, because otherwise she'd just look at me and go, can you stop explaining sports to her all the time? Can she just be, can she just be a little girl sometimes and not want to throw baseballs with Dad all the time? It's okay if she wants you sometimes. So I know what that is. I know exactly where you're at. Sitting down with my daughter to watch a hockey game. Daddy, so who's playing tonight? She knows that Dad likes a certain team, but she doesn't care. So she's like, this is I like this team. Oh, okay, sure. Go ahead and say you like the Leafs. We'll just carry on with the day. So it's fun that way. So it's interesting to see. So I'll get a few questions in here, and so you got a couple extra minutes. I know we usually try to keep things 9 to 10, but
I'm good to go.
Let's see here. Ron checking in, always a good friend. I always like to say good friend of the show. It's like it's the age-old broadcasting mentality. He's at Saskatchewan a bunch of times, but what do you think, and it applies for everybody, what do you think that U Sports Hockey needs to do to get a little more attention, a little more allure, that kind of thing? It as you mentioned, there's only so much airtime that you can get for the situation for national coverage and that kind of thing. So what's the U Sport level need to do to kind of get a little bit more attention, sort of thing?
It's funny, Ron, because we've I had that conversation with our people all the time with the CHL and on Sportsnet with doing the U Cup and like promote it. And it's funny because we're seeing a shift in our business now. Even at Rogers, we're really going to see us focus a lot more on what's happening digitally and what's happening in the social media spaces. And so when I look at where U Sports is at, to get the U Cup on and maybe you get the semis and you get the championship game on once a year, it's not going to provide you, the opportunity to get mainstream. So there's a couple of things that I think have to happen. The first thing is, you have to understand that it's really a regional product. And as much as we look at our friends south of the border and, people in Arkansas are hating people in Oklahoma and whatever else, we just don't have the population to engage an entire country with what's happening in different regions. So I think the first thing is you really have to regionalize it and allow each region, whether it's, the AUS or Canada West or what's happening in the OUA East-West, just to regionalize it. And from that perspective, really take advantage of the digital and social media spheres and maybe think about, the traditional television broadcast. It's just too expensive to do. And not only is it expensive for the production part of it, but it's really expensive for the airtime. And so to think about, the typical thing is, what is mainstream? Mainstream is getting on national TV. While that does help, I think there has to be a shift in the thinking here. How can we do things a lot less expensive? And how can we do them through digital and social? That way games can be broadcast on, on Sportsnet on Facebook or Amazon or Twitter or through Instagram and so on and so forth. So in my best estimation, I'd keep things regional. And then of course, throughout the course of what you're doing regionally, you're always promoting your national championship. But on a grand scale, I would try and partner with one of the big tech companies. And I'd say, all right, get cameras into all of our places, allow our universities to create their own broadcast facilities and do so in a digital way. And then have all of the staff be either volunteer, or as part of the curriculum for broadcasting courses, and use Amazon, Facebook, and all of these different social media companies to literally broadcast the games or parts of the games, or live chat during the games, whatever it is. Because when you think about the reach they have, if we go on and we do a traditional CHL broadcast, it's on a Friday night, it's on a Saturday afternoon, whatever the case is, in our best case scenario on a Memorial Cup where Sidney Crosby's playing because the NHL is on strike, and like what happened in London in 05, you might get 300,000-400,000 people watching. You can open up Facebook and your market is instantly literally 1 billion people. And so now not all of that 1 billion people is going to be interested in what you have to offer. But if 0.00001% of them are, that your alumni, wherever they may be located, can watch a Western game on Facebook or Amazon or whatever else and have it streamed that way, I think you'd be able to draw huge numbers. And the thing about that is you can really regionalize and be really specific with your sponsors and your advertisers, because you know so much about the demographic. Once you're part of that social media sphere, they know everything about you. How old you are, where you live, what nationality you are, what gender you are. They know everything about you. And so to be able to say to an advertiser, hey, I can bring you this many people in these different demographics, you're going to hit home runs. And now the advertiser's saying, yeah, rather than me paying for this broadband, what I think is national TV that goes from coast to coast, I'm going to be able to really regionalize this thing and become so specific to be able to spend fewer dollars to actually reach the audience I want to reach, but have a bunch of sponsors to be able to get to that big number. So those are two things I would do. I'd regionalize it, and I'd find a way to partner with one of the streaming sources and social and digital media. And I think that's how these days you become mainstream. For someone older like me who's just recently in the social media sphere, I would never have thought that or have said that. But I do believe that that's the way it's going here in the future. And look no further than the latest NFL deal. I think Amazon picked up the rights for Thursday Night Football, and they paid a dumb sum to be able to get that, into the hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. So that's, to answer your question, the long and short of it, Ron, would be regionalize and try and take advantage of the streaming and the big tech companies.
Just as a side note, as a former sports information coordinator, that to maybe just looking to give a few tips to some people down the road, how important is quality of that content?
Well, that's one thing that over the course of the pandemic, the quality of the content isn't what it used to be. You're getting digital breakup, you're getting lag, you're getting latency, delays in some of the broadcast stuff. So it's slowly becoming a little bit more acceptable. Now, are you just going to throw on a game with one camera that sits above the rink? And, no one wants to see that type of quality. But I do believe with these tech companies and what they're able to produce digitally, you could probably put 4 cameras in a rink and get these 360 type of cameras. I mean, look at the security systems they have in homes these days, the Ring and that sort of thing. And I think you can do probably a pretty good job for a very small investment from the school and a much larger investment in order for these tech companies to really hunker down and to get in the grassroots of broadcast and be able to do it that way. So of course you'd want your finished product, you'd want good cameras and good camera work, and you'd want good announcers to be able to deliver it because even if you're watching it through streaming services or through one of the tech companies, you're still going to want a good quality broadcast with educated commentary and really good camera views.
This is a good friend of the Mustangs. He still goes under the National Skills Development Association. His name's Dwayne. Good old Dwayne play. Ranking players obviously very tough. He says, obviously, you do a great job, but who's a player that you had ranked low, maybe outside of the first round, and ended up being the going a little higher, maybe being the stud type kid in the NHL?
Oh, geez. You know what? It's funny. You really have to think about that. So we started in 2014 in Philadelphia. We knew we were getting the rights to the NHL then. We had a TSN still had it at that time, but we were able to be in the building and do some things. And then you looked in then 2015, so on and so forth, and whatever 6 or 7 drafts now into it. And it's funny because Man, oh man, I'm drawing a blank. If I had some stuff in front of me, I could probably just, you could come up with that information right away. But, I look at a guy like Nick Robertson. He's not there yet. Toronto Maple Leafs. He's a guy that I think a lot about. I think about Ethan Bear, playing where he is with the Edmonton Oilers, as a guy that has really worked hard to get to where he is. You think about. I don't know. There's a lot of guys even in that sphere that you're saying, oh man, I thought he was a first rounder, and he wasn't a first rounder, and he was a second rounder, and he still never made it. But there's no real name that comes to top of mind that I can think of, Dwayne, where you say, oh, that guy was, he was way down there and exceeded all expectations. It is funny though, because I look back on some guys that I really liked, and there's one guy that I give you a really good example of is Brandon Hagel. He plays for Chicago now, and this is a guy I watched play in Red Deer. He got drafted by Buffalo. Buffalo didn't sign him. Chicago picks him up, and he's turned out to be exactly the same player he was in Red Deer. Just a pain in the rear end, country boy tough, ability with some skill to put the puck in the net, and he's doing all those things with the Chicago Blackhawks now. And I always thought, when I watched that player, I thought, man, this guy's going to will himself into the show. I think he was a 6th round pick by Buffalo. And then when he saw I got, never got signed by Buffalo, I thought, oh, wow, that kind of sucks. I kind of thought that guy might will himself into one game. And then there's other players. I think about Tanner Jeannot is a guy who played Moose Jaw, big kind of lumbering guy. But when Tim Hunter was there, he got an opportunity to play on their top line with a guy by the name of Jaden Halbigawaks and Justin Almeida, both guys that were really prolific scorers in the WHL. But Tim Hunter really leaned on his high-end guys. So Tanner Jeannot was playing on the line with those guys. He got all kinds of ice time. And again, just a big body, hard-working, country-strong type of guy. Really miserable to play against. Made his NHL debut with Nashville this year, played .625, hasn't played since. But I thought, wow, this is a guy who probably looked like one of those overagers who you thought would see the light of day. Ever again in hockey, and it turns out he ends up, getting his first NHL game under his belt. But I can't think, Dwayne, of anyone that I had ranked super low that has exceeded all those expectations to become a really good player. And it's not that I haven't made that mistake; it's just not coming to me right now, top of mind.
Mark Teskey, since Dan Brown is doing a big part of Western hockey, your thoughts on his knack to develop the players you follow out of minor hockey?
Teskey, all right. Yeah, right on. Well, Connor scored again tonight. I think he's tied the Ottawa Sens record, I think, for goals in 6 straight games. So that's kind of a cool thing. But it's such a big piece when you've gone and worked in really good organizations, such as the one Dan worked in with the Marlies, and his ability to coach players at that high level. Your expectation when you're coaching AAA hockey is that you're going to get good players, but having good players and then allowing them to take that next step is an entirely different thing. So always think about the job that coaches have, especially in minor hockey. There's so much pressure on them that comes from the parents, that comes from the players, that comes from the agents, that comes from the organization. And now you have to manage all of those things and then go out and, by the way, we're going to play this system and forecheck this way and do all these sorts of things. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for the guys who are able to develop players at that level, because they face probably more scrutiny and more pressure than coaches maybe even in major junior, because the parents, the agents, everyone is so close to the scene there, where there tends to be that buffer when you get into junior hockey. You can't really walk into Mark Hunter's or Dale Hunter's office. There's a process to go through. You might be able to call them or email them or text them, but if they're not interested in talking to you, they're not interested in talking to you. Whereas you walk out of the dressing room in minor hockey at Canlan Arena here in the Etobicoke, and then, Dan walks out and he's got, oh, you're here? Oh, this parent? Oh, my kid didn't play? Oh, the agent's saying, this is not right, la, la, la. That's a much, much more difficult task, I believe. So to be able to produce players in those high-pressure situations is a huge feather in the cap, and it takes a special person to do it.
Our own coach, Patrick Ouellette, from all the U Sport championships you've done, is there one that stands out as the most entertaining or most exciting?
It was, oh man, they're so long ago. And again, my memory is not good. That's why I wasn't a good play-by-play guy. Where was it? I want to say it was. I know you guys aren't going to want to hear this, but I thought UNB was. I think that one was in. Oh, geez, where was it? Oh man, I got to go back through the archives a little bit. I think McGill won 1 year in Fredericton. And I think Kelly Nobes, the late Kelly Nobes, was coaching there that year. And that was the one championship that I can remember because if I'm not mistaken on this one, I think they wanted to play UNB. Oh, man. But I remember Kelly Nobes being a big part of things there. Honestly, though, again, I wish I had a better memory, Pat, to think about some of the stuff that I'd done. But it's a little bit mush right now, and it might be a COVID brain and not having that active working brain. I think about Trevor Steinberg and St. Mary's, Gardner McDougall and UNB, how they've gone on to win some championships has been fun watching those guys. But honestly, like that one game doesn't really stick out in my mind where I remember this happened and that happened. I don't have that play-by-play mind. I wish I had a better answer for you, Pat.
Got to go just before I send it back over to Clark on this year's draft perspective. There's always those one or two guys that might not be right at the top, might be somewhere in the middle. Is there one of those guys where it's the age old? This was the guy I was keeping my eye on. That was when you're in the coverage and somebody gets picked, you're like, this is the guy. That was the guy. That was the guy I was looking at, sort of thing. Is there one of those in that draft ranking this year that you're like, better keep an eye on this guy, kind of thing?
There's a couple of guys just outside of that 32 right now that I hope I get the chance to see at the under 18s. But Wyatt Johnson's a kid that plays in Windsor. He had an unbelievable second half to the 1920 season. Unfortunately, hasn't played this year, but he's a guy that I think will have left a lasting impression in his 16-year-old year, especially with the second half that he had. Logan Stankoven is a kid that plays out in Kamloops. He's just outside the first round. He's likely to get in there, based on him having a really good under 18s. Smaller guy, really good goal scorer, a guy that I like a lot that probably makes his way into that group. I think about a guy by the name of Mackie Samaskevich, who plays with the Chicago Steel in the USHL. He wasn't in my top 32. But I watched him play last night in the BioSteel All-American game. I thought he was really good. I've been watching some video on him and looking at him, and so he's a guy that's probably turned my mind around a little bit. And there's a defenseman that plays in that U.S. Under-18 program by the name of Sean Behrens, who's just a small guy, but man, does he fly, and he plays with big heart, big passion, big energy for a smaller guy. So he'd be someone that I'd be looking at as maybe a guy who sneaks into the first round. There's probably, those four names, or someone that you might look at 2-3 years down the road and say, I told you so about that guy.
Always a good one there, indeed. We'll bring Mr. Singer back into it. Clark, back over to you, Sam. Thanks so much for the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Sam. I can refresh you about the McGill game in Fredericton because they beat us.
Yeah.
He was trying to get around it there. He did a nice job getting around that.
That was one of my most memorable games. We played UNB, who in the semifinal, which was one of the best teams that I remember facing in U Sports in my, then maybe 17-year career, 16-year career. We got up to a 3-0 lead on them in the semifinals, and obviously I think we were the lowest seed. They were the first seed in Fredericton, packed house. I don't even remember the fans broke the glass behind our bench in that game in the third period. The ice was tilted. It was 3-2, and they had the puck for 99.8% of the time in that third period. And the glass broke, and I wouldn't let them start the game until they repaired the glass. And that kind of took the wind out of their sails.
Nice.
I think we beat them 3-2. We hit a post. So it was McGill game was overtime. We hit a post. Kevin Baker, one of Patrick's teammates, hit a post at the one end. They come down and won it about halfway through OT, won the national championship. So yeah, that was a very memorable game. But anyways, enough of that talk. I wanted to thank you, Sam, and not only you, but I mean all our guests, all the great entertainment and information we receive from you guys. We usually only get to see on TV and hear your names in the columns. And but I don't know what Ryan thought in the gap, but I thought we saved the best for last. I've got many texts here tonight while I've been waiting or watching, and everybody says it's been outstanding tonight. So I really want to thank you for taking time with us. Ryan, I wanted to let you know that I've renewed your contract for next year. You don't get a say. I want to thank you very much. And everybody that helped with this, Broken Tees, our sponsor, Under Armour, the Seventh Man Group, Dwayne Blay for getting Bo Horvat, Tricia Thane Hall for all the work behind the scenes, and obviously all the viewers, all the people that are supporting our program by registering for the Hot Stove Series. And it's really been great having everybody and having a little bit of virtual entertainment in this COVID world. So, we put a proposal in to be back with us next year, again, starting in the fall, and hopefully we can. Sam, Ryan, all our guests and all the viewers, stay safe and healthy, and hopefully we can get back to normal very soon. Thanks again, everyone.
Yeah, thanks, Coach, for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity, Ryan. Unbelievable job, and thank you. And I got to work on the memory part a little bit. But it's funny, things pass, and I don't really go back to think about them. But now that you brought that up, Kelly Nobes was a friend to a lot of people, and has since passed tragically. And that I kind of remember that, just Kelly thinking he was getting screwed by UNB all the time with the room he was in and so on and so forth. And, UNB losing at home, that in the semis there that you talk about, that doesn't happen very often. And people always like to stick it to Gardner, that's for sure. So, that part of it was kind of neat. But yeah, thanks for the opportunity. I would love and welcome the opportunity to come back and do it live and sit in that big comfy chair and get a night in London, because I love being in London.
Yeah. Thanks again, Sam.
Thanks,
the
guys.
memory doesn't get any easier, by the way, as you get older.
I bet.
Thanks again. Good luck with everything. Good luck with the draft and everything, Sam.
Thanks so much. Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you.